did it again. He did it again. God, he's the gift that keeps on giving, Divish. I love him.
For you, yeah. For me, it's just fodder for the Twitter nuts out there.
Well, they're fun.
Yeah, the thing is like in the moment, when he's talking, okay, you might as well let him know. Like, so obviously everybody knows Jerry Dipoto he had a Zoom conference call the other day,
right
after they made the Jorge Polanco sighting official. I mean, I think with no pre-spring training luncheon anymore and everything else, I think we're kind of like, that was our kind of last chance to talk to him before spring training starts. And I wouldn't say it went off the rails, but it didn't go maybe as well. Because when you're on Zoom and like, it's not a free for all, and it's hard to follow up. But like you ask the question, and then he answers, and then like for me, I'm listening, but I'm also trying to, I'm working on a story on it, taking notes. And then he gives kind of long filibuster type answers. So you don't pick up everything he's saying. And he also does the Russell Wilson thing where he lists everybody on the roster and everybody in the organization as well. And so then like you miss certain like phrases or one sentence here, like, in a 7 or 8 minute word answer, you might miss something. You're like, ooh. And so like when I went back to listen to some of it, or I was going through the transcript, I'm like, wait, did he really say this? And then, for a while there, I thought that maybe Twitter was overreacting because that's what they do, especially Mariners Twitter, especially to anything Jerry says, like it's just automatic. And then I went back and listened to it all again. And then looking at it on paper, I can see why there was some anger. And I'm just like, oh man. And then I texted with Jude and Calkins and Burrell. I'm like, so we probably won't hear from Jerry till when? Like,
does anyone prep him?
I think so, but I don't know that
who is in charge of prepping him. Because I'm telling you, I will provide my services for free.
Oh yeah, you're the Puckett crisis firm, and I'm
crisis firm.
I'm the consultant of common sense, and you're the crisis firm.
It's
common sense consultant.
It's so easy. It's so easy. It's not difficult. It's a game. We didn't do enough. It's on me. We're gonna get better. We just couldn't pull off enough deals, and the market just wasn't there for us. But hey, it is what it is, and we've just got to, it's. I take the onus, and I don't think we did. I think we improved our team better. I think the team's better than the rest. Maybe the fan base thinks, maybe the media thinks, but perception is the perception. I mean, take it on yourself. It's so easy to do.
It's just like, you could say like, look, we might have overestimated or underestimated the free agent market and what things cost. We thought we had a couple of deals in line, and at the last minute they fell apart. We were able to go out and get a couple players that we still think makes us a little bit better than what we were before. We're going to need players that maybe had down years to bounce back for us to be competitive. And then we'll continue to try and find ways to make it better until then. And if anybody is still interested in making a trade, we'll still listen because we want to get better, but it wasn't the way we wanted it to go right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, but when you come out and listen, I don't think they should not look at the last 6 weeks of the season. I mean, 34 games is 34 games. Now, the bigger sample size is the majority of the season, but I do believe there were positive trends in the last 34 games. So I do believe, like, when those numbers reflect where they were offensively, I think it was headed in the right direction, Was it just the factors of Dan? Was it just the factor of Edgar? How much haven't done a deep dive in all 34 games they played. I mean, I briefly looked at the schedule. It wasn't like they were playing the who's who in the final 34 games of the season. Now, I'd like to go back and look at the pitchers that they faced in those games. I bet you that had a little something to do with it as well. But, I mean, my eyes told me that they looked different. I mean, I could see it. I totally could see it. But you are banking, like, what they did in the final 34 as that's just going to carry over for the rest of the season. That's a That's a big gamble.
Yeah, I mean, like it's like you said, it passed the eye test.
Yeah.
It was better. The eye test was better. It looked better. It looked more like what they should have, or I think what they were expecting to be like. But yeah, that's 34 games. It's it's one sixth of the season or whatever. I mean, like that's not how like the season's so long, and then you don't take into account injuries and other stuff. I mean, like banking on 34 games. I mean, that's what happened with Shed Long. You remember Shed Long had great 34 games. Dylan Moore in the 2020 season had a great 60 games or last 35 games, and they decided to make him a starter. It didn't work. Everybody always says sample size, you can use it to your advantage or your disadvantage. I mean, I think it's fair to be skeptical to say, like, look, those 34 games, that doesn't necessarily, play out over a full season. But I mean, like, I guess for me, if I was going to look at those 34 games and say, okay, why would I believe that will continue, or why would I believe that taking those 34 games and projecting it to be something better is not what we saw, or like the overall numbers from the whole team. It's what we saw from one player, more or less, that makes me think, okay, this is a lot better. And that's Julio. I mean, Julio was better in those 34 games when he started kind of changing his approach, when he kind of hit rock bottom and decided, look, I got to make some adjustments, and I'm going to listen to what the guy with the statue in front of the media interest is going to say. I think that's a big lifter. I mean, so you look at it this way. Going into last year, they were banking on JP Crawford to have something close to the year he had in 2023, which was his best year ever. It didn't happen. He got dinged up. It didn't happen. You're banking on Mitch Garver or even Mitch Haniger to be something close to what they've always been. They weren't. Jorge Polanco wasn't. He was dinged up. So then you go into this year. Are you really expecting Victor Robles to be the guy you got for the 50 games he was here? Or do you think he's closer to what he's always been? Randy Arozarena, if you look at his numbers, they weren't great. They weren't outstanding. And they certainly weren't what he was 3 years ago, which is precisely why the Rays traded him, because they thought his approach and his skill, or his approach and his production was diminishing while his contract was escalating. So like, you can go through the list of guys and sit there and say, yeah, there are potential pitfalls with all of them. I mean, injury being every one player, but like, there's nothing to say of the team that's, the projected roster to sit there and say, okay, these guys are all going to be this, because that's not how baseball works. And, none of these guys that they have on their roster have been consistent enough to earn that label, except for maybe like Cal Raleigh for the most part. And he's been the most consistent one out of all of them, because, he's not, the fluctuations haven't been huge. He still hits for power. He doesn't have a huge average. He's still pretty clutch. He still plays a lot. But the rest of them, you don't know. I mean, that, at least from the position player side, like the pitching side, Logan Gilbert, where you're going to get,
sure.
And George Kirby, you look at those guys that are younger, you see the trajectory going up. But like from the position player side, like to sit there and say there's evidence that these guys will be something what they've always been, or trending in the right direction, or even evidence of a bounce back. I mean, like that's the thing. Like Polanco, Garver, Haniger, if they're on, whoever's on the team, these guys that were down last year but were getting older. Bounce back seasons are more difficult as you get older, because it's just that much more difficult. So, if you just come out and say, like, this is the roster we could put together, it wasn't exactly how we wanted to work. We still think it can be very competitive because we have enough pieces in place that we still, we added minimally, but we can still add and all this other stuff. I mean, I think that's a better way of saying it than coming out and trying to say that everybody else is reactionary and stupid, even if they are,
right,
to what they saw last year, whatever. I mean, like,
but I think that's the problem right there.
Yeah.
Is that he is saying that you guys don't know baseball. You don't know baseball like I do. Like, this is a good team. I mean, the quote that you had in the paper said, I think there's a reality of our offense, and then there's the perception of our offense. I mean, it's the same. I mean, I don't know why he thinks it's different. I mean, he goes, we play in a tough ballpark to hit him. That's true. Absolutely. It's a tough ballpark. Our offense, though, has generally been above average on advanced metrics, WRC plus, and things like that for a number of years. Last 3 years, we've actually had a very stable offense that's particularly good on the road. We didn't feel like we needed to do a whole lot, but to find ways to support the group that we had. I know the offseason has been long and seemingly slow, but we do feel like we've made a lot of progress last year. I mean, that's the killer quote. I mean, it doesn't take much of to look up what his road splits last year were. I mean, they were 20th in batting average. They were 12th in on base. They were 15th in slugging. They were 13th in OPS. They struck out 25% of the time, and their WRC plus on the road was 13. I think at home was 11. So, again, he's not top 10 in anything. Not one category is he top 10, and that's just on the road. And then off, overall, they were 21st in runs. They were 25th in slugging. They were 27th in doubles. They were 29th in average. They were dead last in strikeouts. I mean, that is not a good offense. I mean,
no,
maybe he's trying to pump his team up. I don't know.
Well, it's honestly just like saying we were less terrible on the road because we were god awful at home.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing is we were. And I think some of the top 10 stuff, I think he mentioned a 3-year span, but when you're evaluating players, you use 3-year spans, but with teams, can't use a 3-year span because
it's not even remotely the same team.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Almost every year it changes.
And then it does even out, but what you're trying to address is how do you make the team from a year ago better, the following year. And sometimes those 3-year totals or the 3-year averages don't pretend. I mean, because like we said, Mitch Garver's 3-year average probably says he's a pretty good player, but he's getting older every year, especially with guys that are over 30. So, yeah, I mean, to me, I look at it this way: how good were they at generating runs per? I mean, it's a simple stat, but runs per game. I mean, in a lot of ways. I mean, because you can take any stat or any analytic and use it, and if you use the right dates or the right metrics, it can give you the information you want to hear. But you have to take the whole of it. And to me, you can use runs created and all that stuff. It's a nice metric, but how about actual runs scored?
That's what drives me nuts about that stat. That's what drives me nuts about it.
Yeah, I mean,
I understand it. It's the weighted runs. Oh, fine, great. It's fine.
It's a good metric to have, but it can't be the only one.
You can't lean on that and then tell your fan base, well, just because we didn't score a lot of runs, we were supposed to.
Yeah, in the weighted run created, we would have scored if it was weighted properly.
But this is like a computer game to him. This is it's not real. It's not real life sometimes. He even talked about how and I'll find the exact quote. Maybe if you remember it. Hey, we've already seen the early projections on the win totals. We're feeling pretty good. What the hell does that? Who cares about what Fangraphs or Zips is coming up with? I mean, it's about actual wins, Jerry. How many games are you going to actually win? I mean, it seems like he gets caught up in, well, these projections are saying we should have, I'm just throwing out a number, 88 wins. And if we don't get that, well, that's not my fault. That's, that computer told us we were going to get that.
Well, it's even the weighted runs created thing, because they bring in the park factors and all that other stuff. So it's you should, but at the end of the day, this is your park. You have to play and you have to find ways to score runs, and it's going to be difficult. And they admit that. Sure. I think probably more than I've ever heard people within the organization publicly blame the park or publicly use the park as a reason for lack of success.
Yeah, but you can't have it both ways too, because it also benefits you immensely.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, it totally benefits the pitchers. Yeah. I just look at you can use the metrics and everything else. They weren't great in situational hitting because of the strikeouts. I'll say they struck out too much. Maybe that gets better. And they just didn't score runs. And how do you score runs in this day and age? We got to get on base. You have to put the ball in play, and you have to be able to, at some point, hit the ball out of the park or get extra base hits, because they're not going to be a high average team. Nobody's high average anyways. So it's did they get better? Are they going to be better by, like they didn't add enough talent to where it's just like, okay, we've made ourselves better just by adding depth and talent, so our lineup can offset people that are struggling or people that are not producing. And so then now you have to turn to your approach and your philosophy, and then like what guys have always done as a way to say, well, look, no, we can still be good because he's always been this way. This was an anomaly last year, but like when 5 guys have an anomaly seasons, you have to adjust and think, well, maybe at least 2 of them, this is who they're going to be moving forward.
And you once again are saying, and I agree with this, and you touched on it earlier, that a lot of this has to do with 44 and how is he going to come out of the gates, right? Mm-hmm. But we've discussed this, like at the same time, yes, he needs to play better. It does raise the whole team. But then you are still putting so much pressure on him, and then he puts pressure on himself to sit there, well, I've got to carry it all because they're all looking at me. They're all depending on me, and if I don't play well, then they don't play well. And rather than giving him help, they haven't given him help at all around the roster. I mean, you got an aging guy to play with Solano. I mean, I guess what is he, DH first? Okay, you got that. You are banking on Polanco, who just had, again, knee surgery, so who knows how he's going to react to that? I know what they said, but we have to see it. Who's, again, to your point, getting older. Maybe last year was just an outlier. We'll find out. But I mean, other than that, they just didn't add anything to improve the baseball team. They added what ifs, cheap deals, because that's all they could afford.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's not like he's going to come out and publicly complain about the payroll.
Well, he can't, and he knows he's protecting ownership.
Yeah, he's protecting ownership and protecting himself. Like, he wants to keep his job. Like this is, I mean, like, it's a good job. You don't want to lose it. Coming out and trashing ownership isn't good. I mean, I was told that like there were people within the organization that didn't like when Service said, hey, we have to play the hand we're dealt. Like, they don't like it when you speak to the reality of the situation.